So the Las Vegas Raiders have officially done the introductory presser to both Pete Carrol and John Spytek, the Las Vegas Raiders head coach and general manager. And today we're going to talk about what these guys talked about within the presser. I'm going to break down some of what they were saying. I'll show you guys the actual clip so you guys can listen into it yourselves. I'm excited for this one, man. A lot of really good moments within that presser. A lot of questions that I think really define how the Raiders will kind of be constructed. And generally speaking, I think these two guys are going to get the Raiders on the right path where one day the Raiders can actually win a Super Bowl in our lifetimes. The Raiders haven't had a lot of success in the past 20 years. One of the ways they will have success is ultimately getting out there and really constructing a solid football roster, right? So a roster that can actually get after it and win some games. And, not surprisingly, this was one of the questions that these two guys were asked. And I want you guys to listen to this and we'll talk about it on the other side.
I've been a big fan of his for a long time. The energy that his teams play with, the commitment to run the ball, play great defense, support the quarterback. I mean, we're going to do all those things here. And that all came through the first couple phone conversations I had. I mean, we two people that I think are just have a love and respect and passion for the game. And although we've kind of grew up on different coasts, we see the game very similarly. And I'm super excited for that.
So there you guys have it, right? We're basically being told that the way the Las Vegas Raiders will be constructing their roster is basically to commit to running the football, play great defense, and of course support the quarterback. And you guys will see a little bit later on that Pete Carroll's asked a different question and he kind of alluded to the same answer as well. So to me, it almost seems like, the agreement between John Spytek and Pete Carroll has already been made that the way we're going to play football, the way we're going to actually build a winner, the way we're going to actually have success is going to come down to the fact that we're going to be a conservative football team, right? We're going to run the football. We're not going to turn the ball over. We're going to play great defense, and we're going to support the quarterback. And to me, this is the way you win. Unless you have Tom Brady or Josh Allen, this is the way you have to win, right? This is the way the Buccaneers have been able to win with Baker Mayfield. It's the way the Seahawks won with Russell Wilson. Essentially, you want to run the football. You want to protect the quarterback. You want to limit turnovers, right? And I think limiting turnovers is such a big part of being able to win football games. Because even for the Raiders, right? Like you look at when Aiden O'Connell took over, when Antonio Pierce first got hired, when Josh McDaniels was fired, the Raiders protected the football, they ran the football, and they played great defense. And this past year, we were not able to replicate that same success. We turned the ball over way too much, and I think that was the biggest issue for the Raiders last year. Turnovers absolutely crushed us. And I think for the Raiders, if you want to win games this year, right, the approach just generally makes sense where you want to protect the quarterback and play conservative. You want to run the football. Now, of course, we'll have to get a running back, right? And that's not going to be an easy thing to do given the fact that you could take Ashton Jeanty with pick 6, but that probably wouldn't be the best resource at that pick specifically. And then when you pick in the second round, you might have 4 or 5 guys gone. So you're going to have to kind of make that decision on who you're going to end up getting. But I'm pretty confident we're going to get a good running back in this class to be able to commit to running the football. Plus, Sincere McCormick looked pretty good this past season. We don't really know what Dylan Labe is. Alexander Madison looked pretty good as well. So I think you add another rookie running back with all of those guys kind of being like the two of that 1-2 punch. I think the Raiders will be able to have a little bit of success, right? But I do like the idea of being conservative and running that style of football essentially. Pete Carroll also kind of had a message to the players, and I think this was kind of interesting because, sometimes coaches kind of say the same thing, right? Like, I think AP would have probably said something very similar. I'm sure he probably did. Same with Josh McDaniels. These guys put it out there, it starts with competition. But the way Pete Carroll talks about it just comes off a little bit different. I want you guys to listen into this.
It all starts with competition. I mean, you're either competing or you're not. And I'm going to make sure that that's really clear to these guys from the moment they get here. We're going to go out and draft a class, and there'll be a few free agents who maybe we'll be able to attract. And we'll need to see those guys, and we'll need to see what they're all about. But the competition part of it is theirs to command. If there's one thing that I want them to understand, and start the message right now, if you want to be on a great team, you need to be a great teammate. And so teaching what that's all about and instilling that in the makeup of our program is going to be crucial. And the central theme in the program is always going to be competition, and that's where it starts.
So there you have it, right? Pete Carroll is putting the message out there that not only does it start with the competition, right? You bring in guys that really want it, that really want to be able to have success, but then you got to be a great teammate. in order to be a great team, right? You can't just say we're going to be a great team. You got to be a great teammate. And I don't think that, those words can be overlooked or overstated, because I think one of the things that happens sometimes is you construct a team and you might have talented players, but sometimes these players don't necessarily care as much about football. They might care more about making money. They might care more about their brand. And I know that might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but trust me, there's a lot of players that don't really care about playing football and being great at football and having success as a team, right? There's not a lot of people out there that are actually like that. But Pete Carroll has made it known that for this team to be great, you got to be a great teammate. You got to buy into the program. And I like that message, right? To me, it's very important that players buy in, because at the end of the day, there's nothing more important than the actual players, right? Pete Carroll's not going to go out there and throw the football, and John Spytek's not going to go out there and hit someone, right? That's not what those guys are essentially going to be doing. That's the responsibility of the players. So you got to treat the players just a certain type of way. And to me, I love the way Pete Carroll talks about it. But one of the things the Raiders will have to do as we kind of get into this process is they got to find a quarterback. And there is no more important position than the quarterback position. I think this was easily the best question that was answered. And this gives us insight into what the Raiders' plan actually is. Both John Spytek and Pete Carroll, both were kind of asked this question, and both of them kind of gave input on this. So I want you guys to listen into this, and we're going to talk about it on the other side.
I'd go back to that. I mean, I got a chance to be around, in my opinion, the greatest player ever. And it was a love of the game and a competitive desire that just didn't allow him to quit. He was never out of a fight. He was willing to do things that the ordinary football player or person wasn't willing to do. And, we're gonna turn over every stone to find that leader for this team too. There's just going to be certain requirements of the job, and it doesn't necessarily take the strongest arm or the best thrower. It's the guys that will push their teammates to a place that's uncomfortable, that will give almost anything to win. That's what the best ones do, and we're going to find one of those.
Yeah, I would add to that it's our mission to build this football team up around the quarterback position. This isn't the only spot. We happen to have the greatest of all time to help us and to see clearly, and we're gonna lean on Tom as much as we possibly can for his insights, because nobody has the insights that he has. He's that unique. But it's the quarterback position is one of the positions on the team, and we've got to make it all fit together well. I've had pretty good success with my quarterbacks in the past. You can go all the way back to college days, and they've all turned out to be really extraordinary members of our club. There's a way to embrace the challenge that the quarterback has from the rest of the football team as well. We need to support our guy, and we need to do what we can to make that work. It's really about making a great football team around the quarterback position. Coach Walsh taught me a long time ago that it's the hardest position in professional sports to play, and so we need to make it as easy for them as possible. And we'll go about doing that by running the football, protecting them, taking care of the ball, playing great defense, and kicking the football when we want to kick it. And there's a lot that goes into this, but to think about how fortunate we are to have Tom Brady with us. It's just a once in a lifetime opportunity.
So there you guys have it, right? As I mentioned earlier, John Spytek talked about committing to run the football, playing defense, supporting the quarterback. Pete Carroll basically just said the same exact stuff. And Spytek said something a little bit more thoroughly, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Pete Carroll basically put it out there that it's about building a great football team around the quarterback. And he gave us a story of how important it is, right? Essentially, one of the things with getting the quarterback position right is it's so hard to get that quarterback position right. It's the hardest position to ultimately find, right? So instead of saying, let's just get this quarterback, let's give up whatever resource to get that quarterback, why not build a great roster? And why not take an average quarterback essentially and have a great roster? And I think that's the way you should build. And truth be told, it kind of changes my mind a little bit on how I process the game of football. We always say you got to get the next Josh Allen, you got to get the next, Brock Purdy, or whatever quarterback it is that you're going to start saying is a top 10 quarterback. But the truth is most of these quarterbacks never win anything. And I think part of that is because maybe they don't have a great roster around them. For the longest time, we've seen guys struggle. Peyton Manning for years struggled winning championships, getting into the playoffs, winning 10, 11, 12, 13 games in the regular season, only to be knocked out in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. To me, I think it's very important what Pete Carroll is pushing, which is you got to be able to actually build a solid roster. And then, again, I don't think there's a more stronger message than what he's ultimately saying there, right? Build a great football team around the quarterback. And of course, he's also saying it that we need to make it easy as possible to make it on the quarterback, right? By basically running the football, protecting the quarterback, and playing great defense, right? So again, to me, it seems like these two guys are bought in on that process, right? To protect the quarterback, run the football, commit to playing great defense. I love that, right? Like, there's nothing better than the fact that these two guys can come together on the same message and agree to what they have to do to be able to have success. And I love the fact that, there's also an understanding by Pete Carroll that we're not going to get the next best quarterback. Like, we're not going to get Caleb Williams. We're not going to get Bryce Young. Like, we don't have the first overall pick. We're not going to get Cam Ward, right? Like, it's just realistic, right? Or I should say it's unrealistic to think we're going to actually get a quarterback that type of caliber, right? A guy that could actually be a top, 5-ish guy. But what we can do is we can get a quarterback. Maybe that's not, maybe he's not a top 5 consensus quarterback. Maybe it's Russell Wilson. Maybe it's Geno Smith. Maybe it's someone like Joshua Dobbs, right? Like, we don't really know, but there's quarterbacks out there that the Raiders could bring in. And as long as we can construct a great roster, that roster should be able to carry that quarterback. So I like that. I like that message. Now, Spytek also answered very similarly, right? But he also did put it out there, the type of quarterback that they're looking for. He said it's not about the arm, right? It doesn't matter if this guy's the best passer. It doesn't matter if he has the strongest arm or whatever. It's about getting a guy that just gets it done, right? He's a guy that wants to be, that pushes other guys to be great. To me, that makes a ton of sense. That reminds me a lot of a guy like Baker Mayfield. Never overlook the fact that Baker Mayfield was written off by so many people. Right? People are like, we don't want this guy. He went, I think, like team to team before he ultimately landed with the Bucs again. And the Buccaneers gave him an opportunity. And of course, Spytek was one of the reasons why they ultimately made that commitment to him. And it's worked out well for the Bucs. I know they haven't actually won a Super Bowl yet, but they're having success. And a big part of that is because they found a quarterback that other teams kind of wrote off a little bit, right? So not only is Spytek telling us that they're going to turn over every single stone, but it really doesn't matter if this is the best quarterback in terms of ball placement, those type of things. At the end of the day, they want to just find a guy that's going to be a winner, a guy that can get it done. And of course, the message is we're going to build around this quarterback. I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, it will be interesting to see if, does Pete Carroll and Spytek, do they actually think that someone like Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew could be that guy? That if you build a great team around, you put a good coaching staff in front of, can those two guys have actual success? I think it's a great question, and we're going to find that out probably in the next couple of months. Chances are the free agency period is going to come. We'll see which quarterbacks are kind of available. We might target a quarterback during that process, which could mean that, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell aren't the guys. And if we don't, maybe you get a guy in the draft. And if we don't go down that route, then that means we're probably going to go forward with AOC as well as Gardner Minshew. And I don't love the idea of going forward with those two guys, but I will say this. Depending on the offensive coordinator, I'd be a lot more comfortable with those two guys this year than I did last year, right? Luke Getsy was a terrible coach. We said it the entire process. That's such a terrible hire that we got stuck with Luke Getsy. And even said that there was a chance Antonio Pierce won't be a head coach because of him hiring Luke Getsy, because Getsy won't be able to have success. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So we'll see what actually ends up, happening as we kind of go forward with that quarterback position. But of course, quarterback position is not the only position you got to get right. There's other positions you got to get right to be able to kind of build the roster out. And John Spytek was asked specifically, what are the very first steps you will take to be able to build the roster out? Like, what is the very, very first thing you're going to do? And he kind of put it out there that they're going to come up with a process. I'm going to let you guys listen in, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Well, my job for the past 9 years has been to see the NFL, and it's in totality every year. So yes, I'm familiar with it. We obviously played the Raiders this year in Tampa Bay. My first order of business is going to be getting with Coach here. We're going to talk more about the kind of player we want, what it looks like at every position, the kind of person we want. To me, it's vitally important. You're going to hear, I think, both of us continue to talk about that. What does it mean to be a Raider? What are the qualities that we're going to stand for? What are the qualities that everybody that comes into this building is going to stand for? I take that very personally and very seriously as a responsibility of mine. Is like the scouts are in charge of finding the right kind of people to bring into an organization. There's no greater responsibility, I don't think, than that. We will be what our character kind of will be our fate, in a sense. And we're looking for first, people that love football, that want to compete every day, or there just won't be a place for you here. And that's okay. We want it to be a hard team to make. We want it to be a hard job every day. But for those that are willing to step up to that challenge and be a part of that, there'll be a great reward at the end of it. We've both lived it. We know what it looks like. So I'm less concerned about roster construction right now and, this position or this position. We've got some really good players in this building, really good, and everybody knows that. They know who they are. Our job is going to be to find more of them, but it's going to start with the person.
So there you guys have it, right? Again, very, very similar to what Pete Carroll was saying earlier, which is that, Pete Carroll was saying you got to be a great teammate, right, to be a great team. And Spytek is basically saying that we're looking for people to compete, right? If you're not going to compete, there isn't a place for you here, right? We want to get a lot of competition in the building, essentially. And he also said that we're going to make it clear what the qualities that we stand on essentially are, right? Is it high character? Is it high traits? Like, what do the Raiders want when it comes to roster constructing? What are some of the positional, elements that we want? Like when it comes to a quarterback, we don't care about the arm. We don't care about the ball placement. The guy has to be a great leader. When it comes to the running back position, Spytek had talked about this in an interview with the Buccaneers. We did a video, I think, last week at some point in which Spytek talked about the running back position a little bit, right? He talked about how Bucky Irving, who's the running back of the Buccaneers, the guy was 5'9", but the first thing Bucky Irving told John Spytek in the top 40 visit or whatever it is, in that visit, the first thing that Irving told John Spytek is, if it's one-on-one in space, that first guy's not tackling me, right? And again, running backs is not all about just, you're the fastest or, you have the best vision. Sometimes it can be a mixture of so many different things. And to me, Spytek, understanding that, hey, we need to put something in place where the scouts understand, the coaches understand, and the players understand that this is, essentially the expectations for this roster. So it's going to be interesting, right? It'll be very, very interesting. And then, of course, the final thing that was ultimately talked about was the staff and how the Raiders will go about the staff element of it. And I think this one was one of the more interesting questions as well. Check this out. We'll talk about it on the other side.
We're in the midst of getting started. I mean, like John and I, we're just getting started at it. However, we have been talking to some people and we're going to try to put this thing together. I'm really looking for people that have been with me, that understand the philosophy to some extent. I want guys that have never been around me before so that they have to learn what we're all about and we can watch the process of them learning who we're all about and what we expect. And then I'm hoping that we can maintain some of the terrific coaches that are on the staff too. So we can have the benefit of the insights that they bring and the continuity that they can generate for us. So it's a combination of people that we're looking for. But it's all going to fall back into the same theme. We want ball people. We want guys that love the game. And I mean, that's obviously, if nothing else, we've hammered that home today, Johnny. So that's, we want to make sure that we do that. Also, it's important to find people that can help us grow, and challenge us. And those also, I know in my history, I need people to keep me on track. As you can tell, I get pretty juiced up and I'm going to get going. I need people to keep me balanced. That's why Glenn has been so important over the years to keep me rolling. But so it'll be a combination to get that done if we do it well, and it's out there for us, and we've got a lot of people that are really interested. So we got to do a great job of that.
So there you guys have it, right? Pete Carroll is putting it out there that although they're just getting started, they have been talking to some people already. At the same time, the Raiders are going to be looking for people who have been with Pete Carroll, right? Pete Carroll's saying that I'm looking at least some of the staff, guys that have been with me because they understand kind of what the expectations is, what the scheme and system is for him. That kind of shores up some of what we were already thinking, right? I believe it was Saturday, I did a video on some of the guys that we could bring in as the coordinators, right? And there are guys that the Raiders could bring in that Pete Carroll's already worked with. And Pete Carroll's worked with some really, really good coordinators, right? Robert Saleh, Steve Sarkisian's another guy, right? A bunch of guys that have won and have had success. Obviously, Saleh has already taken the job, so he won't be coming here. Sarkisian's another guy that will not be coming here. He's a head coach of Texas. Some people have talked about Lane Kiffin. We got to be realistic. If you're a head coach at a top 30 college program, you're not leaving that to be an offensive coordinator. That just doesn't make sense. Lane Kiffin will never be coming to the Raiders. Now, there are guys that are available, right? Like Gus Bradley. Breville, I think, is another guy that's kind of available on the offensive side of the football. Some people say, we don't want Gus Bradley. Understandably, right? I'm just making a point that there are guys that Carroll has worked with that are available. Shane Waldron's another guy. So we'll see what actually ends up happening, right? When it comes to being able to kind of construct that roster, it's very clear to me that Pete Carroll wants guys that he's previously worked with, guys that he knows, guys that know his scheme and system. I'm excited, man, as we kind of go forward. I truly think that the Raiders are in a position where we're actually going to win football games going forward, and we'll have meaningful snaps. We'll be playing in playoff games, right? We'll be playing in January when it actually matters, which we haven't done for 20 years, essentially, right? I think there's a real chance the Raiders make the playoffs as soon as this upcoming year, right? Similarly, we saw Harbaugh do this with the Los Angeles Chargers, where he got the Chargers into the playoffs in that first year. Now, obviously, it didn't really work out for them, right? They ended up losing, but he still got them into the playoffs. And to me, I think Pete Carroll can do something very similar with the Raiders, essentially, right? And we'll see what ends up happening. Watching the Chiefs go to their third straight Super Bowl, potentially three-peat, is absolutely ridiculous to me, because the Raiders, as a divisional rival, you don't want to see that team having that type of success. The Raiders should be able to hopefully match something like that sometime soon. I think Pete Carroll, John Spytek definitely put you on the right path. There are a couple other notable things that did happen. I just want to kind of talk about it really quickly. There was a question that was asked about, how are the roster decisions going to be made? Is it going to be John Spytek, Pete Carroll? Will you have any input? Pete Carroll quickly jumped in. There was no hesitation with this guy. And he was like, we're collaborating on everything. We are essentially partners on everything. It will not be one way or the other. We will be making all the decisions together. And Spytek just sat there and he kind of agreed with it, right? And to me, I like the idea of Pete Carroll having input, because Pete Carroll has had a lot of experiences, right? He's been on multiple teams before he got to USC. He had success at USC. He's had success with the Seahawks. He's been in various positions. He's had various roles. Sometimes I think one of the things that happens is, fans might think hey, you're a head coach, you only coach. And that's true 100% across the board at every single team, right? You're a general manager. You make 100% of the decisions in every single situation, on every single roster, on every single team. The name of the position doesn't mean that you do the same thing for every other team, right? Pete Carroll being a head coach might have a lot more input than Josh McDaniels, right? I remember when Dave Ziegler and McDaniels did their presser, when that question was asked to them, Dave Ziegler jumped in and said, I'm making all the decisions. I'm 100% in charge, right? He made it clear. And I think it's just a little bit different with Pete Carroll having the experiences he ultimately does have, right? Now, Spytek was also asked about roster constructing, and one of the interesting things he said was, there's no perfect way to build the roster. And one of the things he said with that is 44 of the initial 53 players on our roster this past year were basically either drafted by us or they're UDFAs, right? And to me, I love the fact that the Buccaneers had so much success drafting guys or having guys that are UDFAs, because that's the way you have long-term success. Paying players via free agency is it's a bad way to build football teams. And I know we signed Christian Wilkins. Wilkins is not a bad signing because he was a top 5 player at his position, but a guy like Corey Littleton doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? You're paying this guy $15 million a year as a linebacker who had success in one scheme and system. That's not always going to translate to the next. We got guys out there, like Deron Bland for the Cowboys. Bland's going to become a free agent. The Cowboys probably won't pay him. For the Raiders, it wouldn't make sense for us to pay a guy like Bland $20 million and bring him over here, because his success was with one scheme and system. We don't know how that's going to translate to the next one. But when you have 44 of the initial 53 that you drafted or you brought in as UDFAs, those are guys that you've molded into your roster and your scheme. Those are guys that have ultimately worked out, right? And then Spytek also did say one last thing, which was he was giving credit to Pete Carroll. He basically put it out there saying that, when one of the things I appreciate with Pete Carroll is when he initially got to the Seattle Seahawks, they tried with multiple quarterbacks to get it right. They went in multiple directions. They tried multiple different things. And then they tried one thing which was not normal at that time, and that was they took a quarterback that was under 6 feet tall. And this was an era in which if you were not 6 feet as a quarterback, this was the era that you would not be drafted. And the Seahawks went against that, right? Spytek said Pete Carroll thought outside of the box, and he ultimately went with Russell Wilson, and they won a Super Bowl, had a lot of success because of that decision. And Spytek said he appreciates that, right? That he thought outside of the box. And again, I'm not saying the Raiders are going to win multiple Super Bowls as we kind of go forward, but of the general managers and guys that we have had over, basically ever since Reggie McKenzie got fired, there's no one I've been more excited for than this guy right here. Right? I did not have the same optimism for Dave Ziegler, did not have the same optimism for Mike Mayock, did not have the same optimism as coaches for Josh McDaniels or AP. I think Pete Carroll has proven it, love it, and I think John Spytek has a ton of upside. But another thing with Spytek is we'll find out after his first draft. Usually you can tell right away with one draft if a guy is good or not. So probably, May 1st we'll know what type of guy Spytek actually is. When it comes to drafting, we knew pretty much right away with Dave Ziegler. He was a terrible GM. Tom Telesco nailed it. I understand the situation, right? But we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think, man. Hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown of this presser. It took a really, really long time. So hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And I'll see you guys next time with another video.